All right. Hello, everyone. I hope I am coming through loud and clear. And we are going to talk a little bit about Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. I'll only speak for 30 seconds, a minute at most, but you get the idea. No, we'll probably talk for longer than that, as Putin did. Um, I found the interview to be a total disaster. And it's one of these usual things where you think you understand what's going to happen in the world. You think, oh, Putin is going to go in there. Tucker's just going to let him put forth propaganda, conservative talking points, maybe, and he's going to win over all these conservatives. Never is going to allow him to do this. And obviously self-serving that I don't think anyone could take it seriously. And I think that's what we have. I listened to the first hour yesterday when it was live, and then this morning I actually started again. I needed to take a break. I listened while I was on a walk. I mean, it is a slog. Um, it is difficult to get through, and it almost becomes comical at some point. It's so boring, where he never answers any question directly, and he just does some kind of slide maneuver or deflection where he'll talk about some arcane subject or say that it's very complicated, and so on. So I'll talk about a few things just to get the conversation started. So first off, Putin has become an icon, and he's become a global icon for the right. And so much of that has to do with these shirtless photos, Putin riding a dinosaur while firing a machine gun or something like that. And he's thought of as this badass leader. And more intellectual types on the right will think of him as, leading a multipolar world, that is suggested by Dugin, which is a kind of we won't have polls on the basis of America and Russia or capitalism and communism. We'll have the basis on like ethno-religious rooted tradition, and no one will force their hand on anyone else, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Tucker actually dropped the phrase multipolar world, and Putin didn't even pick it up. And he actually went into this forced metaphor of the brain has two hemispheres. The left side controls your right hand, and the right side is more creative and controls all this kind of stuff. But he's like, but it's one brain. The world should be one with shared security based on negotiations. So if you take his words seriously, he wants one world, basically. That's what the metaphor indicates. He's not, in fact, offering Russia as a counter reaction or alternative path to the decadent gay West. He's, in fact, disappointed that he can't be a part of the West. He talked about things, and here I think he was fairly accurate, that there were moves in the 90s to bring Russia into NATO. And Putin gave a speech in the early 90s at the Adenauer Center in Germany. Putin had, that was before he was prime minister. Putin had good relations with George W. Bush. That's also accurate. He claimed that, his war on Chechnya was part of the, post 9/11 war on terror and all this kind of stuff. But he wanted to be a part of the West. And he's very disappointed, you could tell, that he's not a greater part of the West. And it seems like, if you take, again, his history seriously, that Russia could have or should have joined NATO, but it was only the West and their bad faith dealings with Russia that kept that from happening. The other thing that you could glean from this interview is that he takes anti-Nazism, denazification, very seriously. Now, I think that too should be put into context. So, denazification was an actual effort after the war. Many people, even some cultural figures, I'm thinking of Karl Böhm and conductors, things like that, went through a period of, I guess, re-education or exile, etc. That's kind of the original form of the word. But when you're saying that in 2024, it kind of has a either boomer or SJW ring to it. It's hard for it not to. Are you really finding Nazis under every bed? Are we really to believe that Vladimir Zelensky's government is a Nazi government? I have no doubt that the Azov battalion, or I guess the Azov regiment, is a real thing. And I also have no doubt that many people in the military have Nazi paraphernalia and are kind of badass about it, and etc. You can also find those people in the American military. You can find those people in various militaries. I'm sure there's some Nazis in the Chinese military, just because it's a self-selective type of thing. But to imagine that Ukraine is a Nazi state is just beyond absurd. And I think an interesting conversation could be had. I've seen these conversations among liberals of, what do we do with Azov Battalion? Clearly they are super right wing. What do we make of this? Should we not talk about it? Should we tolerate it? Should we deal with it after the war? Those are all fair things to say. But to assume that Ukraine is the inheritor of Adolf Hitler is just childlike. And it also makes Vladimir Putin seem a lot like your average libtard or someone who, votes for Joe Biden for the sole reason that Donald Trump's neo-Nazism must be stopped at all cost, and so on. And again, a lot of these people who are sympathetic towards Putin have put in all this effort to claim that Nazism or fascism doesn't exist. It's all a phantom menace or a boogeyman or what have you. They put so much effort into that. Now, I think that's untrue. There are Nazis out there. I think it's fair to say. But they love Putin, and then you hear it from the horse's mouth that he thinks that, and he said this, this was just exceedingly disingenuous, that Ukraine can be a sovereign state and come up with its own identity, etc., but it can't be Nazism. And Tucker asked, I guess to his credit, a reasonable question, which was, how are you going to stop that? Particularly when you don't control the country. And there are also these just exceedingly bad history takes, or just bizarre in terms of emphasis. So he also talked about how the Polish government was collaborating with Nazi Germany, with Hitler. And the Polish government itself was a dictatorship at that point. And I guess they were collaborating in the sense that they weren't at war or had common interests or something like this. And then he emphasizes that about the Poles. They've got a Nazi problem too. It's deeply embedded in their history. And then he just kind of skates over. I don't even think he mentioned it, but the very most he barely mentioned the fact that the invasion of Poland in 1939 was actually not simply a German invasion, something that probably most people who go to American high school know. It's actually a dual invasion because the Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, or Stalinist Russia, were in alliance, and they were carving up Poland together and taking their pieces of it. To emphasize the collaboration of Poles is absurd. I heard Tom Holland say this. He was like, you always hear people say, I wish world leaders knew more about history. It's such a nice thing. If we don't learn from history, we're bound to repeat it. And Tom Holland, he said something very funny. He was like, I wish Vladimir Putin knew less about history, in fact, because he's obsessed with history and he has this encyclopedic, I guess, conception of it, or kind of archival notion of history. But it's all entirely self-serving. And it's all very flat, is the other thing that I noticed with Vladimir Putin. He would say things, like there's the fall of the Roman Empire, and he's like, the Germanic barbarians were developing economy, or it's all he talked about was percentages of, transactions and rubles and wands and dollar and all of this kind of stuff. And it just gets to a point where you're dealing with a technocratic, but fundamentally just shallow human being, just fundamentally shallow to the point of being contemptible in my mind. You are, I agree, in a sort of war against the West. The West doesn't like you. Whether the West is going to deal with you on equal footing in your lifetime, Vladimir Putin, kind of dubious, debatable. So why don't you take this opportunity to discuss what it means to be Russian, what the Russian world actually offers? And instead, it's just this like quantitative transactional notion of the Russian soul or whatever. It's just absolutely pathetic. I'm not a Russophile exactly. Maybe I'm a little bit of one. But if I were a romantic Russian advocate, I would be extremely disappointed with the way that Vladimir Putin depicts Russianness or something. So he has this like flat conception where there's no dynamic in time, there's no change over time or something like this. There's just Russia, and it's the Soviet Union. It's the entity being dealing with the Golden Horde. It's all just the same thing. It's a static conception of Russianness. But it's also just an utterly flat conception of Russianness. When Tucker asked him to talk about what it means to be a Christian leader, he didn't say anything. And he just talked about how we tolerate Muslims and Jews. I mean, just utterly pathetic. I mean, as much as Donald Trump is ridiculous in his discussion of Christianity, maybe due to the fact that he was raised in a church, married in the church, in fact, of the Church of Positive Thinking and all of this kind of thing. And he's said these famous stuff of, like Chronicles Part 2, the best of the Chronicles, my favorite book in the Bible. He said all of these statements that indicate that he has an appalling lack of knowledge of the Bible. Even Donald Trump's conception of Christianity seems kind of deeper and more compelling and magnetic than Vladimir Putin. I think Vladimir Putin, there was this suggestion a while ago that he's suffering from Asperger's, whatever it is. I think he is sort of autistic in that way. Now, he's an autistic monster. Vladimir Putin has invaded Ukraine. He does not hesitate to order the death of, political opposition, oligarchs that are out of favor, etc. But I don't think that's the real him. I think the real Vlad is actually this weird history nerd who to gish gallop you to death with his knowledge of arcane detail. All of which is exceedingly in all these negotiations gone wrong, in which the West never blah. He's kind of a history nerd. And the necessities of turning him into a bit of a monster. But I don't see him as a man of history. Donald Trump as much more of a great man of history. I don't even know what to make of Vladimir Putin after this. But anyway, I have some more things to say, but I will allow some others people to speak. Excuse me.
Yeah, just
I have a bit of a
one.
sore throat
Oh no,
today.
you need a Ricola, Richard. Um,
Yeah, I need a good, got some coffee here, but that's probably not
Yeah,
shall
good
we?
for a sore throat.
he
Hold on,
even
Mono.
brought up.
Hold on. Shall we send Aiden a mic? And also, don't want to be autistic, but wasn't the Soviet Nazi was a pact of non-aggression, not an alliance?
Yes, but they both
But it was
invaded
an
An
alliance.
important
Poland at the
They
an
same
they made
important
an
time.
distinction
agreement with
because
France, with the French
the
Communist
Russians wouldn't
Party,
want to
to
be affiliated with sort of the
Hold on,
Nazi.
hold on.
I mean, I see what you're saying. Many normies don't really understand what happened with Poland and that partition. Like there's no love lost for the Poles between the Russians and the Germans.
Yeah,
That's something they can universally agree on.
yes. But I mean, I think it's not an alliance. That is fair to say. It is
it
not
could
like
be
the Axis
interpreted as
powers,
an alliance
but
because they did like
Uh,
when France was about to be collapsed, right? The Soviets sent a telegram to the French arm, the French Communist Party to greet the Nazis with open arms. So when you got the Soviets telling the communists in France to open their arms to the Nazi invaders, that seems a lot as an alliance to me.
yeah, I mean, let's not get caught up on this historical detail. I think we basically agree to to emphasize the collaboration between the Poles and Germany, and then to skate over the dual invasion of Poland is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't write a high school history paper and suggest that.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
you're
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it was a
I
very
mean,
regional issue. The Valonians, the Galicians, many of those people made up the ranks of the Travniki men. So to sort of generalize that it was a Polish issue on the whole, no, I mean it
no,
was a Western Ukrainian, a southeastern Polish issue in many cases. Not, we have to be careful
yeah,
about these things.
not
yeah. Let's not get into this, guys. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
let's not spurg.
like
Let's
this
But
is
not
hold
the
up.
spurg. Yeah.
problem. This is the problem with history is that like there's an infinite amount of detail out there. You can always find like something that you could make evidence of something else. The struggle really is towards theory, towards understanding the big picture. Otherwise, you might as well be an archivist or a librarian. And I don't get into it. I saw this History Speaks, who I've had some good conversations with. He tweeted this out with Lauren Southern, and it's just exactly what I was talking about. These people are so impressed, or they're forcing some opinion of like, isn't it just so amazing that he can talk for 2 hours? I mean, I remember these like times. I'm just thinking of an episode here when I was with my paternal grandparents. My paternal grandfather was a Navy man, a career Navy man, and just being around a table and listening to these old men yammer on and on and on about details. At some point, you're like, shut up! Tell me something that is useful, or tell me how to understand the world. Talking about like the paint job on a World War II jet and the tilt of the wing, or it's irrelevant. It is fucking
Like,
irrelevant unless you are some sort of archivist. And like, so this idea that Putin is like incredibly intelligent or, like dynamic or something because he can do this stuff is absurd. He was at best a defense lawyer on behalf of Russia. Like Russia did nothing wrong. It's all these broken agreements and we negotiated this, and my goodness, how could you, go against us on that? It just becomes tedious. You invaded Ukraine. Just own it. Just own it. Don't tell me about some agreement that it wasn't fully actualized or something. It sounds like a civil lawsuit,
Yeah, trying to
and not
legalize this.
history.
Yes, exactly. Just own up to the fact that
But
this is a
this,
security
yeah,
issue. Don't justify this through the law somehow.
yeah, exactly. And I got this impression from this biography of Putin by Philip Short. It's big, it's fairly readable, but just Putin is this odd person. I mean, he was the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. He's a behind the scenes guy, and he was thrown onto center stage. You know, it was like grabbing the guy who does lights and throwing him out into the center of the stage and demanding that he, be the lead protagonist. And it's not who he naturally is. He isn't naturally charismatic. But the fact is, if you're going to be a leader, in this day and age, but in every age, in fact, you've got to be charismatic and interesting and compelling. And as crazy and stupid as Trump is, he obviously gets this. It's part of the job. You can't just say like it reminds me of people who defended DeSantis of like, well, he's a brilliant politician, but he's just not appealing at all.
He
But
lacks
you need to
riz.
look over that. Right, but it's like saying, this guy is an amazing baseball player, but he just can't catch. Like he cannot catch a baseball. But other than that, it's like, well, he's clearly not an amazing baseball player. That's part of the game. You can't. That's an essential component, I guess. DH, but you get my point. Being a compelling presence is actually not dispensable as a political leader, and I think it just shows something about him. Like, I guess I have more questions now about what Putin wants exactly. Like, he seems to genuinely believe in this stuff. He published a historical article shortly before the invasion that went through all of this stuff. What does he actually want, or is he in fact motivated by historical pedantry? I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, what motivates Trump? Trump is primarily motivated by his own ego. I mean, you could say, oh, he wants to save America. He wants the '80s back. He hates Obama. He hates the liberals. Who wants to? Oh, that's fair, but it's all about Trump. It's about Trump being in office. It's like ego writ large. I think it's planned or something. That's really what motivates him. But like, what motivates Putin? Did he engage in an invasion in which he's lost 100,000 men or something like that on behalf of like a contract dispute from the 13th century? I mean, is that literally what is motivating him? I mean,
Oh no,
if
yeah.
so, then what in the actual fuck?
Yeah, not only that, like you remember the part in the interview where Tucker was like, "Okay, not long ago, can Hungary claim territory in Ukraine and Romania?"
Yeah.
And like, what about this? Like, I think Tucker would have a better point if he says, "Would Turkey have claims on Crimea?" Because it used to be part of the Ottoman Empire, and to this day, Crimea has a Turkish population, that being the Tartars.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I mean, remember, Tucker's father is.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?
Yeah,
You're
Richard,
cutting out.
you've been cutting out a little bit
Wait,
occasionally.
Oh,
you know,
Yeah.
what Tucker's father was what?
Tucker's father has a relationship with Hungary. I charge up these headphones. I'll just go speaker mode here. My headphones are need a charge. So I'll just charge them for about 15 minutes or so. Yeah, Tucker's father has a relationship with Viktor Orban. I forgot what it is. I think it's like foreign lobbyist or something like that. And I don't know, excuse me, what has Tucker heard? Has Vlad, insinuated to Orban that he might have a claim to parts of Ukraine if he just kind of holds tight and stays more or less friendly with Russia and so on. Has that been suggested to him? It was almost as if Tucker knew more than Putin at that point. And again, Putin doesn't really answer the question. It's just this kind of vague, well, maybe, I don't know. It's complicated. Xbox, would you like to speak?
Sure, yeah. So I had a slightly less negative view of the speech than you did, and I'm a total Putin shill. But I guess
Oh
as
no.
far
Are you speaking right now?
can you hear me?
Oh my gosh.
Can you hear me?
I can hear him.
I can't
So.
hear Xbox.
Should
Let
I
me do
drop
this.
out
Can
and
you
come
guys
back?
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to make Zag co-host. And then I'm going to drop out myself or something like that. I can't believe this seems to have okay. This seems to have something to do with Bluetooth or something like that. This app is so buggy. All right, I'm going to drop out, or I can't drop out. Oh
Yeah,
my god!
you're the host of the space.
You would have to just
Was
if
Xbox?
you
Were you speaking, Xbox? Just give a
Yes, you
hand if
were.
you were.
Just kick
Oh my
Xbox
gosh,
and have him back on.
this
See
is
if that
so
works.
annoying.
yeah,
Can
just
I
pick
make
just pick
someone
the
else
one
host,
person.
Zag?
No, you can't pass off host, but I would remove Xbox and bring him back, and that should fix the problem. Yeah, that's less of a risk than you restarting your phone. Not your phone, but just closing the app. Okay. Richard, can you hear us?
Richard, can you
I
hear
can hear
me?
you now.
Can you hear
Okay, good.
Zag?
Zag, speak. No.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh my gosh. Should I just restart the space?
Zag, what do you think? Should he restart the space? Uh-oh, if Zag
Oh
is
my gosh.
talking.
All right, guys. I am gonna restart a space. So I'm gonna end it and then you can just pop in a moment. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.